And so I kind of had to find this own voice inside me to say, like, Julie, you're doing something amazing, and just do your best. Just do your best every single day. And if that means showing up 30 minutes late for class, just try to hold your head high and walk into that classroom and get out of it what you can when you can.
You're listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles, a podcast that supports parents of children with disabilities by sharing the stories of individuals who have grown up with disabilities and the organizations available to help parents along the way. Stay connected with us by clicking the subscribe button and leave us a comment if you want to join in on the conversation. Welcome back to the Water Prairie Chronicles, everyone. Today we have a special guest with us. Julie Flygare is here from Project Sleep. And Julie serves as the president and CEO of Project Sleep. She is also an internationally recognized patient perspective leader and an accomplished advocate, and the award-winning author of Wide Awake and Dreaming, a memoir on narcolepsy. And earlier this year in March, she delivered the TEDx talk, What Can You Learn from a Professional Dreamer? So Julie, welcome to the Water Prairie Chronicles.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited about introducing you to our listeners. But could you tell us a little more about yourself beyond just what that more technical introduction was?
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed with narcolepsy with cataplexy when I was in law school at age 24. And so I did kind of change the course of my life in a pretty big way to take on health advocacy, and found Project Sleep eventually. But I still have a lot of other interests. I'm a runner. I'm training for a marathon right now. I love gummy candy, and I love hiking. I live in Los Angeles, so always trying to get outside at least once a day. And then I do spend a lot of my time, promoting narcolepsy awareness and running Project Sleep.
So you had a bit of a change of course then with this diagnosis.
Yeah, a big.
Did you, when you were in college, so you were working towards your law degree at the time, what was your initial path plan?
Yeah, I went to law school to study art law. I had been an art history major in college, and my dad was a lawyer, and he convinced me to combine my passion for art with law. And it was a fascinating area. I still studied a lot of that in law school. But after my diagnosis, I did take a class in health law, and I ended up writing a huge paper. It was supposed to be about a 30-page paper, and I wrote an 80-page paper on the Orphan Drug Act and the development of 2 narcolepsy treatments, which actually had fascinating histories that were quite interesting from a legal perspective, but of course really interesting to me as a person with narcolepsy too. So that really piqued my interest, and then I took all the health law classes that were available at my school, and just felt so passionate by the time I graduated that there was so much more work to be done. There had been a lot of great advocacy, but there was so much more to do in this space. And so, when I graduated from law school, I decided to write this memoir. And so I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. And so it was a big change. But I stuck with it, and I worked on the memoir for 3 years while I was doing other stuff to pay my bills, contract work. And so I published the book in 2012. So it has been almost 10 years now. Yeah.
I really like the name of it, the Wide Awake and Dreaming. It's for those that are listening, you may or may not have listened to some of the earlier episodes. My son has narcolepsy, so our family is on a similar journey in supporting him and helping him. After learning that you had narcolepsy, could you see signs earlier in life that were there for you?
Well, I think the thing that I noticed when I was around 21 was when I was laughing at jokes and my knees were buckling. As soon as I felt that, I knew that was weird. I said, something weird has happened to my knees, and felt like they melted inside or something. And no one around me saw it for a while. So then I was like, is it really happening? But then eventually it did start to show. I would collapse forward onto a desk or almost lose a glass I was holding. So that was always concerning to me. By the end of my first year of law school, I thought maybe I might have a sleep problem because I couldn't drive 15 minutes to school in the morning after getting a full night's sleep. But looking back, that sleepiness had built up since I was probably 18 years old, and I had just come up with all the
Okay.
excuses, all the coping mechanisms, and just thought, all college students are sleepy. Or I was a varsity athlete, I was just trying to do too much, or I didn't have enough caffeine,
Hmm.
or I'd had too much caffeine. I mean, I wasn't a night owl, I wasn't a morning person, the room was too hot, the room was too cold. Like, I'd come up with every excuse
Right.
in the book. Yeah. And then for me, like the hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, like thinking that a burglar was breaking in or a cat was scratching me, but then waking up and remembering I don't have a cat, but it still felt like I could feel the scratch marks. All of that
Interesting.
I never thought of as like a medical problem. I'd asked like my family, and my brother said that had happened to him in college and it would go away. So I had been waiting for that to go away. And so it was actually through a sports therapist. I was a runner at the time, and I went to a sports therapist about a running injury, and she asked if my knees ever buckled, and I said, "Well, there's this thing that happens when I laugh. It doesn't have anything to do with my running." But then I told her more about that, and she said, "I think I've heard of that. I think that's called cataplexy." So once I found the word cataplexy and looked up and found out, loss of muscle tone or muscle weakness with emotions, and then only found in narcolepsy, then I saw all these different parts of my life. It was all came together in like a few seconds. I was like, oh my God, it was describing
Right.
my life for the last few years.
So we're using some words that may not be familiar to everyone that's listening. So cataplexy, you just defined that pretty well. But the way that I've always thought of cataplexy is whenever you watch the comedies when people talk about narcolepsy, that seems to be what they're always talking about is but they take it to an extreme where someone's laughing and they just fall.
Yeah,
But that isn't
the
truly
same
what
thing.
what cataplexy is.
Right. Well, I think the issue, I'm not really sure what they're trying to depict, and I've even done an analysis of films with narcolepsy. But the main thing to understand about cataplexy is that I'm conscious. I didn't pass out. I didn't fall asleep. I'm laughing at something and then I fall over, but I know what's happening around me. I just can't move my body. So I'm paralyzed in a conscious body. So it doesn't, certainly in real life, look funny. Usually looks more like a seizure.
No.
So I'm not really quite sure how the depictions of narcolepsy came to be. It seems to me that it looks like people are just in the middle of a conversation, then falling over asleep, sort of. But
Right.
yeah,
And from what I've found in talking to different people is that it's not always like in you it was your knees buckling. In others it may just be that they're dropping something. It doesn't seem to affect the same part of the body for everyone, or even the same amount of their body that it affects.
yeah, it can
Or
be.
am I wrong in this?
Well, it can manifest in a variety of ways. I think if you have severe cataplexy, you probably experience all of those lesser versions, but it is important to point out the
Okay.
lesser versions because some people might just have a slight slur of their words or, like maybe clumsy holding something, and it's not a full body falling completely to the ground. Mine certainly started as less, but then they got worse. So yeah, it's important to know about the variety of manifestations, but it's generally very similar. I'd say emotions. Like when I talk to other people with cataplexy and they start telling a story, I know like, oh yeah, that's the kind of emotion that would cause it for me too. So it can be like laughter or funny things. It can be annoyance or surprise.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
winning things. So like when I'm playing tennis well and I'm satisfied with the good shot I hit, I'll like my grip on my racket will loosen and then my next shot isn't very good because I was so excited that I hit
Okay.
the good shot. Yeah.
Well, and things like that, because what I'm thinking is early on, if that's starting to show up, like for you, you had just a little like loose feeling for just a moment. It wasn't enough to really be worried about. It was just kind of an oddity, probably, that you're
Well,
noticing. But then as it builds,
it was certainly so odd that I was like bringing it up. So I did bring it up to a doctor even before I
okay,
started, like within a few months, I did bring it up, but just because it was so strange and so different, it would be like almost fainting, like you just know, like, ooh,
oh,
something's
okay,
switched in
so
my body. This isn't normal. But it took a few times for me to recognize it was always with emotions. It was always when I was laughing. So I started to say to my friends, like, don't make me laugh. My knees, my knees.
right,
Yeah.
right. The when and laughter does it takes a lot out of you to begin with. So I would understand why that would maybe be a trigger for because it is such a strong emotion. It's one that we enjoy, but it does, you know, in someone without cataplexy, they're going to notice sometimes that they can't stand up straight. It just takes more energy, I think.
Yeah.
And for, because I don't know what the percentages are. I believe Christopher may have said that there's 70% with narcolepsy typically have cataplexy. Is that the right number, or is there another percentage?
That sounds about right.
Okay. And I've seen diagnosis phrasing, and I believe you had written this in one of the emails to me, with the coding on it. Now, when Christopher was diagnosed, he was just told that he has narcolepsy and that he doesn't have cataplexy. So how are those coded? When you see the initials and the numbers, what do those mean? I know I've seen a 1 and a 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now they call it narcolepsy type 1 and narcolepsy type 2. So narcolepsy type 1 is with the cataplexy, and then narcolepsy type 2 is without cataplexy.
Okay, so if I say NT1 or NT2, that's what it's referring to.
Yes.
Okay, so fairly straightforward. I just didn't know for sure.
Yeah, no, when I was diagnosed too, it was narcolepsy with cataplexy was all they said, but now we have those types. Yeah.
And do you know, typically, is there a certain amount of time from onset that you would know for sure whether you're going to develop cataplexy or not? Can that be developing later?
They say it's usually within a few years.
Okay.
That if it doesn't develop within a few years, it's unlikely. The one other thing to check would be to see if your son has the genetic marker for narcolepsy. And it's a genetic marker that happens in about a quarter of all people generally. However, it is like 99% of type 1 narcolepsy. They have that genetic marker. I have that genetic marker. It's called, I forget exactly, but this 060, DBQ0602 or something like that. And so that is a good indicator, so that you could think, well, if he doesn't have that marker, then it would almost be very unlikely that he would end up developing cataplexy. If he had that marker, then it would be a little bit more interesting to think, well, could that be a possibility?
Right. All right. So I haven't heard anything about genetic testing on this. So, but we've talked to others in other situations. We've talked about different genetic testing, and sometimes there's some information, but they're still learning more. Are we in that stage with narcolepsy?
Yeah. So so far what they know is that there's certainly a genetic connection, and so with that is that simple blood test actually, that looking for that genetic marker I just described, but it's not like you have that and then that you have narcolepsy, because a quarter of the population has that, and then what ends up being a genetic factor plus environmental factors, and this is again for type 1 narcolepsy, and they believe those are flus, upper airway infections that end up kind of spurring the development by your brain misperceiving these hypocretin cells or orexin cells that are in your brain for the flu, and end up attacking your own brain cells. And that is, so yeah, it's partly genetic, partly environmental for the development of type 1 narcolepsy.
Okay.
And there is a lot less known about type 2 narcolepsy, and that's, I think, really important that researchers increasingly focus on type 2 narcolepsy and idiopathic hypersomnia, and better understanding those two conditions, and what's actually causing that, and what's the root cause, because it's not actually a loss of hypocretin or orexin for most people with narcolepsy type 2. But then what it is causing it, and we don't know.
Right. The so we're kind of jumping around a little bit here, but I find this very interesting because it's information I haven't gotten before, and so we're always trying to find out more. So let's go back to where I was on our questions. So you talked about when you were first diagnosed and some of those early signs. How were you diagnosed? Was there a specific doctor that you went to? Was there a type of testing that you went through?
Yeah, well, I lucked out that I found that sports therapist, because most people go about 8 to 15 years on average between their symptom onset and a formal diagnosis. Mine was about 6 years if you look back at my original symptoms. starting. However, probably it was only a matter of a few months once I figured out I have these problems, these things are happening to me, and I started seeking out answers. I did get to that pretty quickly because of that sports therapist. So random, I did, after I figured out that it could be narcolepsy with cataplexy. I lucked out as well that I had a friend in law school whose dad knew this great narcolepsy specialist right down the street from me in Boston at Beth Israel. So I was able to get in with that specialist and talk to him, and he was pretty sure I had narcolepsy with cataplexy, but I had to go for the overnight sleep study. And so I waited for that test, and I did the 24-hour sleep study where they, hook your brain up to all these electroid things and watch you sleep, and then during the next day have you take these naps and see how quickly you go to sleep and how quickly you go into REM, dream sleep in particular. And then just a few weeks later, I was diagnosed officially because I'd gone into REM dream sleep so quickly in all 5 of my naps that my neurologist was so impressed by my brain.
So, neurologist, is that who you said that you were working with?
Yeah.
So that, and I thought that ideally it would be a neurologist that specializes in sleep disorders. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I saw, you could call him a neurologist or a sleep specialist. Either one is probably a correct term. But I just, think of him as a neurologist because he's part of, at that university, it's the neurology department. If you were at Stanford, like some of the best doctors there, they're part of the psychology department. It's kind of weird where sleep ends up fitting in. And then sometimes sleep is with pulmonology because of sleep apnea. So maybe you see a pulmonologist, but actually I think technically right now my doctor is a pulmonologist here in Los Angeles, but he's also a sleep specialist. So, yeah.
So you've covered across the U.S. here between your initial diagnosis and where you are now.
Yep.
So back to when you were first diagnosed. So you were in school at the time, in law school, so not a light load of coursework that you're doing. When you found out what was happening, did you apply any accommodations to help you get through those studies, and what were they, if so?
Yeah, at first I did not. The dean of my law school, I'd met with the dean of my law school over the summer about my grades because I hadn't been happy with my grades my first year of law school. And at the end of a long meeting with her, I said, well, there's this other thing. I might be diagnosed with narcolepsy. I'm waiting for the sleep study. And she says, you think you have narcolepsy? And I said, yeah, no big deal, sort of. And she said, oh my gosh, well, we could get you all these accommodations. She started listing out things. And I said, oh no, that's I don't need any of that. And she said, you don't think that might have anything to do with your grades your first year? And I said, no. I was still majorly in denial about the whole situation.
Right.
So it took a while for things to kind of set in. I got the official diagnosis, and then I went back to her a few months later and I said, do you remember we talked about maybe getting accommodations for narcolepsy? And she was like, yes, of course. And so she really, I lucked out there again. They'd had another student with narcolepsy before me. And apparently it had been somewhat of an adversarial situation in which the doctor had called the school and been like, you don't understand this, and this is what's happening. And so, someone before me had a less pleasant experience, which made my dean of my law school more aware of how serious narcolepsy was than I probably was before my diagnosis. And so it was just a really pleasant experience that she said, let's have you register for classes early so you can get some of the better, more kind of like participatory classes as opposed to lecture style. Those classes are always more popular, so they filled up fast. So I got, priority registration. I got a cubicle of my own in the basement of the library, which was not completely private, but kind of off the beaten path, so I could take naps there. And I got extended time for all of my papers and all of my exams. And I got to take them in a separate room if I wanted. And I think those were the main things. She also recommended a few teachers that she just thought would be just more understanding in general. And that was really nice. I bonded with a few professors that just would have me in for tea, during office hours and just chit chat about life and be kind of like mentors, where I felt comfortable talking about my health as part of my experience there. So,
did you have any trouble getting to class like getting up in the morning and getting two classes?
Yes, I certainly did. I started treatment after I was diagnosed. So I was taking medication twice a night and then once a day. And the timing of the nighttime medication was really challenging for me to wake up for the second dose of it in the middle of the night. And then time that accordingly so that I could wake up in the morning, get ready, and drive to school for my class times. And so I was often cutting those times very closely and or being late for class. And I think in law school it's not so problematic probably as it is, when you're younger. So that's lucky, I guess, that grad school, I'm pretty sure you could go to no classes as long as you took the exams and did well.
Right.
You would be okay. So I certainly didn't like showing up late. And I think the biggest thing for me in that area was just like giving myself grace and realizing I was doing my best. And that was actually a big realization for me because no one around me was saying at that time, like, just going to law school with narcolepsy is huge. It was just kind of assumed that I was going to continue with my life as planned. And so I kind of had to find this own voice inside me to say, like, Julie, you're doing something amazing, and just do your best. Just do your best every single day. And if that means showing up 30 minutes late for class, just try to hold your head high and walk into that classroom and get out of it what you can when you can.
And that's one that I think is really hard. And I think it's important, if we have any older students listening to this, that the grace side of it, I think, is important that they can hear you say, because it is hard. No one, especially in your late teens, even early 20s, no one likes to be the one that's coming in late all the time, because some comments are made by peers that's not understood, and you don't necessarily want to share your personal life with everyone around you.
Right.
So that is hard. And you said it very well, that that's really what you need to do, is just to understand this is who you are, this is what you need to do. And for you to pursue your goals and your dreams, you need to be in that classroom, even if it means going in 30 minutes late and just going in. But I do recognize that's not an easy step to take as a student.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I think too that those accommodations and being able to have those conversations with your instructors outside of class makes that an easier step to take.
Yeah.
Because then you're not just showing up late.
Yeah. You always still feel kind of bad about it, but what can you do? And just knowing too, like, showing up on time but not feeling well and not being really there doesn't really do that much for you. Like, just fighting through sleepiness, just to be present. Like, is there really value in that, as opposed to like maybe taking a nap first and then being 20 minutes late, but being actually like functioning, and being able to remember what's happening and take notes. So yeah, it's always tough to balance, but probably we all need to give ourselves a little bit more grace and not worrying so much about what our peers think.
Because this podcast is geared toward parents primarily, I'm going to speak in here from a parent's point of view. I'm the one who is pushing my son sometimes to do things that, as you're saying, taking that extra nap a little bit longer and being able to show up fresh and ready to go is better than going in and just being asleep the whole time. But from my side of it, I don't always remember that. And he has to remind me from time to time that, no, if I go right now, this is a mistake. I have to finish this first. And so parents that are listening, if you're working with a child who's been diagnosed now and you're trying to work through it, I understand that side of it, but we need to support each other to make sure that our kids are getting what they need and look at it from maybe a different perspective than what we would have done ourselves, because it is a different journey that they're traveling.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the reminder there, because I'm just thinking of all the different times he and I've had that conversation that I'm telling him what he should do, and he's telling me, no, I can't do that right now.
Right. It's hard to communicate because no one actually wants to be not feeling well, right? So your initial inclination is like, yeah, I got to get up, I got to go. And I think for narcolepsy specifically, it's a gray. It's never like so black and white to me, like, even at work, to think about taking a sick day. I feel sleepy every day. So to some extent, it's like, well, how sleepy or how bad is today? And it never feels
Right.
like quite enough. Like if you're like, oh gosh, I'm like, I have the flu, like I can't do anything. Narcolepsy is kind of like, I'm like, 50%, or am I 25%, or am I 75% today? And so that's another area where just taking some days and just being like, I don't know if I really need the full day off, but just taking it to yourself
Hmm.
can be hard to figure out. One thing I was going to mention too is the spoon theory. I don't know if you guys have talked about the spoon theory. So it's a concept developed, I believe, by a woman with lupus, and she was talking to a friend, and they were at a cafe. And so her friend said, I don't really understand what it's like to have lupus. And so she gathered a bunch of different spoons on the different tables. And she said, okay, like what it is like to have lupus is like everything takes like energy. So she's like, what do you do when you wake up? You take a shower? Okay, that takes a spoon. You drive to work? That takes a spoon. What are you going to do at work? Ooh, spreadsheets? That takes 2 spoons. And so the concept is sort of you get to the end of the day, you have 1 spoon left, and you haven't made dinner. But if you make dinner, you won't have a spoon to do the dishes. And so I think it also speaks beyond the basic symptoms, but to say about just like limited energy expenditure over time. And it can be helpful because sometimes I feel like I don't want to do stuff at night. And it's not because I think I'm going to have cataplexy or I even need to like take a nap. It's just that I just have limited energy. So I would say to some of my friends and family, I don't have enough spoons for that today. And it can be kind of a nice way for some family members to kind of say, "Hey, are you up for going to this comedy show? Or do you not have enough spoons?" And the person can be like, "Nah," or "Yeah, I'm feeling good enough. I can do that." So if that's useful for anyone, that can be a helpful communication tip.
I like that. I'm thinking even if we're talking about teens, that's a way to maybe grasp that a little bit better too. I like that. So do you have any other tips for students? These are good so far.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the best I've heard is from a fellow person with narcolepsy who talks about if you're thinking about getting accommodations, and she says to think about your worst days and what you would need on your worst days. Not be, because maybe you don't need the accommodations, but it's better to have them in place in case you have one of your worst days that coincides with like an exam. Um, and I think that's really helpful advice because, and yeah, narcolepsy can be invisible and it changes day to day. So you kind of think maybe I don't need all of these accommodations, but it's Danielle Brooks. She talks about, basically plan for your worst days. And I think that's a really, really helpful tip as well.
That's smart because a lot of times you're having those meetings at the very beginning of the school year. So you're coming in fresh after vacation. You aren't studying for exams, as you're saying, or trying to get a paper in while you're doing midterms. And so if you can think of how you felt back in December and May when you were wrapping things up, that maybe it's better to do the meetings then for the next semester when you are wiped out and ready
Yeah.
to go.
Yep.
So from school into work and adulthood, have there been challenges for work? You were talking about how some days maybe you should take just a personal day just to have that rest. What other challenges have you noticed with work?
Um, I have always tried to get jobs where the deadlines were long term and that they weren't so immediate. Um, and, um, I think everyone's energy is different. I know some people find that to have a really high energy job, like being a teacher or something that you're engaging with people constantly, that's actually better and that keeps them awake. I think I'm just kind of an introvert, so that kind of socialization, I get really, really tired from it over time. So I like more like writing jobs and jobs where, if I did need to take a day off or come in an hour late, that it wasn't going to be the end of the world, and that I would still be
Right.
able to get my work done as long as I could find productivity somewhere within the normal, day,
Hmm.
or stay a little bit late if I came in late or I needed a nap in the middle of the day. So I worked about 4 years in different nonprofits before I became full time for Project Sleep in 2018. And
Okay.
so then, of course, I've been very lucky to have a great employer, which is the board of directors of Project Sleep, that's, really understanding about, obviously, working on my own schedule around my symptoms and, trying to utilize my pockets of wakefulness, as best I can. But yeah, work can be tough. Finding a place to nap in a building, that was tough. I had to get formal accommodations at one of my workplaces so they could turn a phone room into a wellness room. And that room
Okay.
became very popular with a lot of people using it for resting. So yeah, there can be a lot of different challenges. Even disclosing, that you have narcolepsy to your employer is a whole nother thing. So we'll be having a broadcast about that in a few weeks for Project Sleep about work and work accommodations. Yeah.
Now we talked about medication earlier. Um, in your in your experience since you were first diagnosed, I'm assuming that you've tried different types of medications at different periods. Have you had any negative reactions to any, or have you moved from one to the other smoothly?
So I've stayed on the same nighttime treatment for 15 years. And then
Oh wow.
for daytime treatment, I have switched between some of the different ones that have been available, and not too much challenge. I feel like they
Oh good.
all have side effects, and some of the unpleasant, anxiety and impacting my mood. And so I haven't felt that they're all that different, really. I just try to not
Okay.
take too much of it. And I feel okay. I'm certainly not 100%. I still have symptoms every day. I still take naps every day. But yeah, I think it's been such a journey still, which is just like tweaking the medications, figuring out, like,
Yeah.
even if my doctor said this is the average dose of this treatment that people take, like, for me, I need half. Maybe some other people need more. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
so it's a lot of tweaking, figuring out when to eat, um, and when to take naps. And For me, treatment has also meant a lot of social support, and finding other people that have narcolepsy and knowing I'm not alone, and learning tips and tricks from other people with narcolepsy. And also, I had a therapist for 2 years when I first was diagnosed, and she really helped me process some of, like, the psychological experience, in the sense of, like,
Right.
loss and change, and isolation I felt. So, yeah, I think of treatment as medication, certainly essential, but then napping, making some lifestyle adjustments, and social support.
Now, we've mentioned Project Sleep a few times, but can you tell us more what Project Sleep is?
Yeah, so Project Sleep is a nonprofit raising awareness about sleep health and sleep disorders. We do a lot of advocacy work and empowerment efforts to help people, especially once they want to start sharing their story publicly. How do they do that? Everyone has an amazing story, like, such incredible stories. But kind of giving people a framework for building not a presentation, and how do they present in 20 or 30 minutes, a bit about the narcolepsy facts, but also about their personal journey with the condition. Uh, so, so that's one of our programs, is the Rising Voices program. And then we have a scholarship for students with narcolepsy as they're starting their first year of college. So we just gave out 30 scholarships to 30 different students across the country that are starting their first year of college with either narcolepsy or IH. And we have
What is IH?
idiopathic hypersomnia.
Okay.
Um,
So that's the excessive sleepiness?
Idiopathic hypersomnia means, yeah, it's excessive sleepiness, it, without, yeah, knowing the cause. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Then, so you launched a new podcast. How long has it been now? It's been a couple months?
yeah, maybe a few
It
weeks.
hasn't been very long.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
I think when I first talked to you, you had just released, I think, the first episode. So it's been just a short time here, but you've had quite a few episodes out already, it seems like.
Yeah, so we started something called the Narcolepsy Nerd Alert broadcast series back in 2020, 2021, I think. And so we had these videos, and then we would create toolkits, which are nice PDFs about like summaries of the broadcasts. But then someone asked us if we might turn those broadcasts into podcasts. So actually all the content was already recorded. It's just about editing it down to be, a shorter podcast feeling.
Right.
Yeah. So I call it upcycling. We've upcycled the broadcast into podcasts.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's exciting to reach people in different ways, which, different people like different kinds of communication.
Well, and what types of topics are you covering on the podcast now?
All sorts of different things. From science and, treatment development to, I think some of the things that I hear people talk about less, which is more like napping in narcolepsy and brain fog. We did a great one on brain fog. And school accommodations. We did an episode on that. We have, trying to think what else. All sorts of different topics. We did one on writing in narcolepsy, and then we will have one about creativity and art and narcolepsy this fall, and hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis. We'll have one on that. So just trying to cover a bunch of different things and see, people will hopefully tune in for what piques their interests.
So we've talked a lot about narcolepsy, but Project Sleep indicates more than just narcolepsy. Mm-hmm. So do you also, you talked about the unexplained sleepiness and the narcolepsy. Do you cover topics like sleep apnea or things like that too?
Yeah. So Project Sleep it's supposed to be an umbrella organization for sleep health and sleep disorders. We have piloted some programs in narcolepsy more specifically. And so like our Rising Voices, where we train people on how to share their story. We started that with narcolepsy, but now we have expanded that to, we'll train people with any sleep disorder and how to share their story. So we have advocates with sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and idiopathic hypersomnia. And we are very open to training people with any other sleep disorder. We're really looking for those advocates so we can continue to expand the program. We also did just train our first mother of a person with narcolepsy this year. So also making that an option as well. And our advocacy work in Washington, D.C. is focused more broadly on sleep health and sleep disorders, making sure that our sleep researchers are getting a good amount of federal funding to be able to do their important research and better understand not only narcolepsy, not only sleepiness, but all aspects of sleep. So that area of our work is very broad. And then we have a sleep-in event every spring during Sleep Week, and that is about raising awareness about sleep health and sleep disorders by, we kind of have a fun, like stay in bed all weekend, and we do broadcasts and different awareness efforts just about the importance of sleep.
When is that each year?
It is during National Sleep Week, so it's usually like the second or third week of March.
Of March, okay. Just so we can all watch for when we need to plan our naps.
Yeah, it's really.
I think I saw that you had posted some. Was it T-shirts or pajamas or something? It was something. Was it maybe it was a T-shirt that I remember seeing. It was something on your in Instagram that I saw about that time this year.
Yes, we do. We have this really cute design for the Sleep-In event with a cloud and the word Sleep-In in it. So we did sell T-shirts this year with that logo.
Yeah, it actually was when I think I had just come across your Instagram account, and then I saw those, and I was seeing it everywhere that I was looking. Cool. So it was cute.
Thank you.
So do you have any other special events coming up? So you do the Sleep-In each year.
Well, we just did an event in Nashville last Saturday. That was our first in-person event, since 2019. And then we do a lot online. So the Nerd Alert broadcasts are monthly. We have story sharing sessions where our Rising Voices speakers share their story via Facebook Live. So we have an events calendar on our website, and we keep that pretty well updated with all the different online events. And we will have a lot in September for World Narcolepsy Day. Leading up to World Narcolepsy Day, we'll be having an increased number of opportunities online for people to tune in hopefully, hear different content that is of interest to them. And then in October, we have something called the Sleep Advocacy Forum, which is when we go to DC to meet with different leaders of different sleep nonprofits and professional societies for one day. And then we go to Capitol Hill to advocate for the sleep community.
Nice. So I want to link your website in the show notes and on our website. And that's project-sleep.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then is the podcast linked right off the homepage, or how can they find the podcast?
Yeah, I think it's under About Us, our podcast. Yeah.
If they go to Apple or Amazon Music or any of those places, how is it listed? Is it Project Sleep Podcast, or what is the name of the podcast?
Yeah, the Project Sleep Podcast.
Okay. So we'll link all of that in the show notes. If you're listening, so you can look in the show notes for the podcast. If you're on YouTube, you can see it in the description below. So check those out and follow those links. And let me think through if there's any other major questions. I have tons of personal questions, but are there any others that I should follow on this one?
Well, I think you asked me a little bit about treatment and treatment development, and I just want to mention there are definitely really exciting. It's a really exciting time for narcolepsy and treatment development, and there are some clinical trials going on now, and there are going to continue to be new clinical trial opportunities. So we do have a portion of our website about getting involved in research, and we link to some of the main trials there, but it's also always great to go on. You can go right to clinicaltrials.gov and put in the word narcolepsy or idiopathic hypersomnia or whatever your condition name is, and then you can see all the different clinical trials happening, and you can check by your area. And it's really important that people participate, because otherwise we just can't move these treatments forward. They have to be studied. And for any rare disease, that filling those trials is a huge thing to overcome, and getting people that both qualify for the trials, but then, can make it through, because it's not easy always either to be on a trial where you don't know whether you're going to get a treatment or a placebo, and then how do you manage all your symptoms. So we're always trying to raise awareness about those opportunities, and hopefully in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see some more treatments being approved and on market that will help more people, because we just need more options. There are great treatments now, but we just need more options. Will definitely help more people.
But as you say, it is a rare disease, so trying to get enough people in one area to be able to run them through a trial is hard to do. So that's it's nice to know that you have that listed on the website too, so that we can direct people that way.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're ready to go to the speed round. So I don't know if you've seen any of our past episodes, but for those that are listening, if this is their first time, we'll just run through what the speed round is. Every guest that comes on, we send them through a series of 10 short questions, and they have nothing to do with the interview at all, but it's just a way to kind of connect everyone together. And the first 3 questions are open-ended. I'll ask her a question. She'll just tell me the first thing that she thinks of. And then the last questions are either or questions. So I'll give you a choice of 2 words or phrases, and you just choose one or the other. If you can't choose, you can say both or neither. There's not a right or wrong on any of this. So the first question, what's your favorite color?
Gold.
Gold. That's my first one. What was the last book that you read?
Wild Nights.
Wild Nights. Mm-hmm. Is that fiction? Is it?
No, it's nonfiction. It's a beautiful book by a Emory professor of English about different parts of our history and our connection to sleep.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. So I'm always curious, and I've gone through reading a lot of about the different books that are being shared, just because I'm always looking for something new to read.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite holiday?
Ooh, I love holidays in general. I guess I'd have to say Christmas, because I love like holiday movies, like, any Netflix, holiday movie. I'm rom-com, love it.
Yep. That's same here. All right. So the next ones are all either or questions. So cake or ice cream?
Oh, Cake.
Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Ocean or mountains?
Ocean.
Winter or summer?
Summer.
Watch a movie or read a book?
Watch a movie.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Oof. Neither.
Yeah, which is an answer. And Twitter or Instagram?
Instagram.
Julie, thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing a little bit about your journey with narcolepsy and helping us understand a little bit more about what our kids may be going through, or if any of our parents even are working through narcolepsy themselves. Maybe they can understand a little bit more about it themselves. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for all that you are doing, Tanya.
This podcast is made possible by support from our listeners. We want to give a shout out to our superfan, Praveen S. If you want to help offset the cost of producing the Water Prairie Chronicles, become a supporter at buymeacoffee.com/waterprairie.
You've been listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles. Any resources mentioned during this episode will be posted in the description. If you're interested in joining us as a guest, contact us through the links in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. We appreciate your support as we build this resource. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for a new episode.